I was halfway through a peaceful ride across the Orion Transit line, enjoying a cup of overpriced station coffee and trying not to think about work, when a woman practically launched herself into the empty seat beside me. Not just any woman either. She was one of those stunning blue-skinned Valorians that seemed genetically engineered to make ordinary people forget how language worked. Silver eyes. Dark hair. Expensive clothes. The kind of woman who probably had people walking into walls whenever she entered a room. She glanced behind her, grabbed my arm, and said completely seriously, "You're my husband for the next 3 hours." I stared at her. She stared at me. I took a sip of coffee. "What are the benefits?" I asked. She blinked. "What? Medical? Dental? Shared vacation package?" For the first time, she looked confused. "I'm serious." "So am I. Marriage is a major commitment." She looked like she wasn't sure whether to laugh or strangle me. Finally, she sighed. "My ex-boyfriend is getting on this train at the next station." "Ah. He's arrogant, rich, annoying, and convinced that every woman who leaves him eventually regrets it." "Sounds charming." "He spent 2 years reminding everyone how successful he is." "Only 2 years?" She groaned. "I need him to believe I've moved on." I looked around the nearly empty train car. "And you picked me? You look confident." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Lady, if you knew me, you'd know confidence wasn't the word." "Bored?" "Absolutely." "Curious?" "Definitely." "Occasionally reckless?" "Without question." "But confidence?" "That was mostly an illusion supported by good posture." She continued, "Please. Just until we reach New Terra Station." I leaned back. "What exactly does a fake husband do?" "Smile." "Easy." "Hold my hand." "Manageable." "Look successful." Now you're asking for science fiction. To my surprise, she laughed. It wasn't polite laughter. It was the kind that escaped before she could stop it. The tension in her shoulders immediately relaxed. That laugh did something unexpected to me. For the first time, she looked less like a beautiful stranger and more like an actual person. A nervous person. A worried person. Someone who genuinely needed help. I sighed dramatically. "Fine. For the next 3 hours, I shall be the greatest husband in the galaxy." "Thank you. But if anyone asks, we've been married at least 5 years. She raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because nobody survives the first year of marriage looking this relaxed." Another laugh. This one lasted longer. The train began slowing as it approached the next station. My temporary wife suddenly sat closer. Very close. Close enough that I could smell her perfume. Close enough that my brain briefly forgot how gravity worked. Then the train doors opened. Several passengers entered. One of them immediately stood out. Tall. Expensive suit. Perfect hair. The expression of a man who probably practiced smiling in a mirror. The moment he saw her, his face lit up. Then he noticed me. The smile vanished. Interesting. He walked directly toward us. My companion quietly grabbed my hand. Her fingers were cold. She was actually nervous. That settled it. Nobody should be this stressed on a train ride. I gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. The ex-boyfriend stopped in front of us. His eyes moved from her to me. Slowly. Judgmentally. Like he was evaluating damaged cargo. "Well," he said. "This is unexpected." The woman leaned comfortably against my shoulder. Not bad acting. I decided to contribute. I wrapped an arm around her. Her eyes widened for half a second before she recovered. Excellent. Teamwork. The ex's expression tightened. "Who's this?" I smiled. The kind of smile that usually got me into trouble. "My wife forgot to mention me?" The ex visibly froze. Beside me, the woman nearly lost control of her laughter. And in that moment, I realized something important. This wasn't going to be a simple favor. This was going to be fun. The ex-boyfriend sat across from us without being invited. That alone told me everything I needed to know about him. Confident people usually waited for permission. Arrogant people assumed they already had it. He crossed one leg over the other, and gave me a smile that somehow managed to be both friendly and insulting. "So," he said, "what do you do?" I felt the woman beside me tense. Apparently this was his favorite game. Measure everyone in the room and decide whether they were worth acknowledging. I smiled. "Oh, a little of everything." His eyebrow lifted. "Such as?" I should have given a normal answer. A sensible answer. A boring answer. Instead, my mouth made a decision without consulting my brain. "I own 3 companies." The woman beside me nearly inhaled her own tongue. The ex blinked. "3?" I nodded calmly. "4 if you count the one I accidentally started." "Accidentally?" "Long story." There was no story. But he didn't know that. "What kind of companies?" I took a thoughtful sip of coffee. "Transportation logistics." A complete guess. He nodded. "Interesting." "Interplanetary agriculture." Another guess. His eyes widened slightly. "And?" I leaned back. "Luxury pet insurance." Now even I wanted to know how that business worked. The woman was staring at the floor, clearly trying not to laugh. The ex looked impressed despite himself. Unfortunately, once you tell one lie successfully, your brain immediately decides to attempt several more. "What about you?" I asked. He straightened proudly. "I manage investments." "That's adorable." The woman made a choking sound. I kept my face perfectly serious. The ex frowned. "Adorable? Everyone starts somewhere." For the first time, he looked genuinely irritated. "Excellent." Then he shifted tactics. "You seem accomplished. Where did you study?" Now this was dangerous. Specific questions could expose me. Fortunately, confidence is often more important than accuracy. "Oh, several places." "Several?" "I enjoy learning." The ex narrowed his eyes. "What languages do you speak?" I should have said 2. Maybe 3. Something believable. Instead, I heard myself answer. 6. The woman abruptly covered her mouth. The ex stared. 6 languages? 7 if I'm tired. That made absolutely no sense. Yet somehow it sounded impressive. "What are they?" I immediately regretted everything. Then I started listing languages I'd heard mentioned in documentaries, movies, and random advertisements. The ex listened carefully. I delivered every answer with complete confidence. By now, nearby passengers had started paying attention. A few pretended to read while obviously eavesdropping. The train had become entertainment. The ex folded his arms. "Your wife never mentioned any of this." I glanced at the woman. "She's modest." She finally lost the battle against laughter and buried her face against my shoulder. To anyone watching, it looked affectionate. Only I knew she was trying not to explode. The ex looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Good. Very good." Then he asked the question that pushed everything over the edge. "So what achievement are you most proud of?" A normal person would have mentioned business success. Maybe a charity project. Something reasonable. Instead, I smiled. Because if we were going to lie, we might as well lie professionally. And judging by the growing audience around us, everyone on the train was ready to hear the answer. I leaned back in my seat and folded my arms thoughtfully. "My greatest achievement?" The ex nodded. The entire train car seemed unusually quiet. Even passengers pretending not to listen had clearly abandoned the effort. I looked out the window dramatically. There was a colony on Drac 7. The woman beside me immediately lowered her head into my shoulder. She already knew disaster was coming. It was a peaceful farming settlement. The ex listened carefully. "What happened?" "A bear." He blinked. "A bear?" "Not just a bear." I lowered my voice. "A genetically enhanced mountain bear." A few nearby passengers exchanged confused looks. Good. That meant they were paying attention. The ex frowned. Drax 7 doesn't have bears. Exactly. That seemed to impress him for some reason. I continued. Nobody knows how it got there. The woman was shaking with silent laughter. It destroyed harvesters, crushed transport vehicles, stole an entire shipment of fruit. The ex looked skeptical. A bear stole fruit? It was a very complicated bear. Several passengers snorted. I kept going. The colony governor called for help. And? I happened to be nearby. Of course I wasn't. I'd never even heard of Drax 7 before today. But rescue teams couldn't land because the bear had taken control of the landing zone. The ex stared. The bear took control? Strategically. At this point, a nearby passenger openly laughed. The story had escaped reality several minutes ago, and was now operating entirely on confidence. So what did you do? The ex asked. I sighed heavily. Honestly? I tried diplomacy first. The woman finally lost control and burst out laughing. I waited for her to recover. The ex looked completely bewildered. You negotiated with a bear? For almost 20 minutes. What happened? It rejected my proposal. Naturally. The train car erupted with laughter. Even people across the aisle were listening now. I continued. So I had no choice. No choice but what? Wrestle it. The ex's mouth fell open. The woman buried her face against my chest. Passengers were openly recording now. I could see someone wiping tears from their eyes. What happened during the fight? The ex asked. The poor fool was still treating this like an interview. It was close. I nodded solemnly. Very close. How close? At one point the bear threw a tractor at me. Gasps and laughter spread simultaneously. But eventually I lured it toward a cliff. The ex leaned forward. And then? We both slipped. The train car was completely invested now. The woman looked up at me, silver eyes shining with amusement. And then? She asked. I smiled. Then I gave the bear a motivational speech about self-improvement. The entire carriage exploded. People laughed so hard they nearly fell out of their seats. One passenger actually applauded. Another shouted, What happened to the bear? I pointed dramatically. It opened a bakery. The applause became louder. The ex sat frozen. He genuinely couldn't determine whether I was joking anymore. That was the best part. The woman wiped tears from her eyes. For several seconds she simply looked at me. Not at the fake husband. At me. The laughter slowly faded. Then she smiled. It was softer than before. Warmer. I haven't laughed this much in years, she admitted quietly. Something changed in her voice. The joking faded for a moment. The train, the audience, the ridiculous story, all of it seemed to disappear. She looked away briefly. My ex hated when I laughed. I frowned. What? He thought it wasn't elegant. That told me everything I needed to know about him. The ex immediately shifted uncomfortably. She continued. He cared about status. Money. Appearances. Her gaze returned to mine. You know what's funny? What? You've spent an hour making up complete nonsense. Professionally. She laughed again. But you've been kinder to me than he was during our entire relationship. For once, I had no clever response. The ex certainly didn't either. And somehow, during the world's most ridiculous fake marriage, I realized I wasn't pretending to enjoy her company anymore. Neither was she. The rest of the trip passed surprisingly fast. Partly because the passengers kept asking questions about my completely fictional life. Partly because the woman beside me kept adding details to my stories whenever I paused. At one point she informed everyone that I had once negotiated a trade agreement between two planets using nothing but a deck of playing cards and a sandwich. I immediately confirmed it. Naturally. Marriages are built on trust. The ex-boyfriend, however, looked like he was living through a medical emergency. Every minute seemed to make him more uncomfortable. The closer we got to New Terra Station, the more desperate he became. Finally he sat forward and smiled. The smile of a man who believed he had found an escape route. I knew something felt strange. I raised an eyebrow. Oh? He held up his data pad triumphantly. I searched for you. The woman glanced at the screen. The ex looked delighted. There's nothing. He looked at the passengers. No companies. Then at me. No interviews. Then at the woman. No awards. His grin widened. This guy is a fraud. The train car grew quiet. Several passengers looked disappointed. The woman glanced toward me. I simply shrugged. That's true. The ex froze. What? Complete fraud. What? I nodded. I don't own 3 companies. The passengers chuckled. I don't speak 6 languages. A few people laughed. I definitely never wrestled a genetically enhanced bear. Now the entire train was laughing again. The ex looked around in confusion. Then why would you lie? Because it was funny. The passengers applauded. The ex looked horrified. The woman laughed so hard she nearly fell into my lap. But he embarrassed himself. The ex protested. No, an elderly passenger called out. You embarrass yourself. Several others nodded. Another passenger pointed at me. At least he's entertaining. A third added. And your bear story was amazing. The applause returned. The ex's face turned several fascinating shades of red. For the first time during the entire journey, he had no speech prepared. No clever response. No superiority. Just silence. The woman smiled sweetly at him. You know something? What? You spent years trying to impress people. She wrapped her arm around mine. He spent 3 hours making people happy. The ex opened his mouth. Nothing came out. A few seconds later he grabbed his luggage and marched toward another train car. The moment he disappeared, the entire carriage erupted into cheers. Someone shouted, Bear Hero! Unfortunately, the nickname caught on immediately. I would probably never recover. The train finally slowed as New Terra Station appeared outside the windows. Passengers began collecting bags. The strange little audience we'd accidentally created started dispersing. For a moment neither of us moved. Then the woman looked at me. The playful expression was still there. But something softer had appeared underneath it. Thank you. You're welcome. I was nervous when I sat down. You hid it well. I absolutely did not. Fair point. She smiled. For a few seconds neither of us spoke. Then she asked quietly, Why did you help me? I thought about it. There were probably a dozen possible answers. But only one honest one. Because you looked like you needed someone on your side. Her silver eyes softened. Then I added, Also because you're incredibly beautiful. She laughed. There it is. I was trying to sound noble. You lasted almost 3 seconds. A personal record. The train doors opened. Passengers began leaving. Technically, our fake marriage had reached its expiration date. 3 hours. Contract completed. Mission accomplished. Yet neither of us seemed eager to stand up. Finally she rose and picked up her bag. So. You are no longer my husband. I suppose not. She stepped closer. Close enough that my heart suddenly remembered it had a job. Then she smiled. Would you like to be my boyfriend for dinner? I stared at her. After spending 3 hours inventing lies, I finally found myself speechless. She laughed. That bad of an offer? No. I stood and grabbed my bag. Just unexpected. Is that a yes? I offered her my arm. Let's start with dinner. She slipped her arm through mine. And after that? I grinned. That depends. On what? If any genetically enhanced bears attack the restaurant. Her laughter echoed through the station as we walked off the train together. For the first time that day, neither of us was pretending.